Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into three men talking fantasy football, and in this case, two men this time. We are coming to you in the off season. We're going to talk running backs ranked 13 through 24. We've already covered running backs from 1 to 12. We'll get into a couple other little news and notes type of stuff. I'm here with Mr. Anthony Perez. How are you, Mr.
Good
Perez?
evening, Billy. I'm doing great. How are you?
I am all right. We had a very, very interesting wild card weekend that we just
Before we get
finished.
into that, I just want to shout out Tommy, who's under the weather right now.
Yes. Um, Tommy get better. Although Tommy did very much enjoy the wild card weekend stuff. Some of his predictions did not come true. Although it's okay. Crazy wild card weekend indeed.
I thought it was
I
a bit lackluster. I mean, there was one good game out of the bunch, but
I I want to take such a victory lap on the Rams victory over the Vikings. I feel like it was inevitable for the Vikings to come crumbling down. Um, I don't know if that necessarily undercuts what Sam Darnold accomplished this year, how well he did for fantasy purposes, etc. But it just was the Vikings have four losses the whole year, two to
two
the
to the
Rams,
Lions, two
two
to
to
the
the
Lions.
Lions. Yeah,
Yeah, actually, I
so
want to touch on that real quick because I Sam Darnold, man, he looked bad against the Lions in the last week of the season, right? I mean, he looked like his old self on the Jets seeing ghosts, and I chalked it up to it being the Lions being a real good team this year, obviously, and so that didn't really surprise me. You know what I mean? I figured it's the Lions, whatever. He'll turn it around. He was playing for a massive contract this
right.
past weekend because his fate was up in the air. You remember the Vikings drafted J.J. McCarthy, so it's hard to imagine that they were just going to move on from him and give Darnold all this money and have him be the quarterback the next 4 years. It maybe could have happened, I don't know, but he was ultimately playing for a huge contract, and he played himself out of a contract
You think
because, if you think about it, after watching that performance, who's going to want to invest now 4 years, $100 million, we'll say, just ballpark. I don't know what the numbers are going to be, but watching his performance, are you confident he's going to lead you to a Super Bowl?
no? And I didn't. I mean, as well as his performance was during the year, I kept reverting back to I'm waiting for the Cinderella story to end. I'm waiting for it to end, and I kept eating so much crow on it. And I don't like to your point. The last two games were just bad. They were just really bad. I don't know if that means he played himself out of a contract. Maybe he played himself out of as rich of a contract as he would have had.
Yeah.
Um, versus basically if he would have won that game. Maybe if they still would have lost to the Lions, but he would have had a better performance. It would have been different too. A lot of ifs ands and buts. But to your point about the JJ McCarthy situation, I wonder if this could go into a lot of different things. But we heard a lot this year about guys like Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield, how maybe the teams that they were on initially and or wherever they got traded, like we're not giving quarterbacks enough time to develop. Hence, that's why we were saying like the Jets might have ruined Sam Darnold the way they did Zach Wilson, and now Zach Wilson's going to become a crazy QB somewhere, which won't happen. But like there was something to that where you had like quarterbacks that need time to develop or whatever. And we were kind of proving that this coming year. I don't necessarily think that narrative is wrong, or that anybody's wrong about this, but I think the Vikings now they're going to have to stick around with Sam Darnold for this coming year. How could you not? After a 14-win season, even though it ended really badly, they're just going to have to say, so like, what contract is he going to accept? To your point, what team is going to go out and get Sam Darnold now? He's already on the Vikings, right? He already knows the system. Kevin McCarthy's going to be interested in keeping him there, right? So what other contract is he going to get? Figure he'll probably get offered somewhere around 30, $35 million, which is going to be in the lower end of quarterbacks, the lower end of starting quarterbacks, let's say. JJ McCarthy will come back. Anytime he falters this upcoming season, the Vikings fans are going to be shouting for JJ McCarthy. I mean, guaranteed. What other option is there, though?
Well, it's hard because now you look at it as will this turn into a Falcon situation by giving Kirk Cousins all that money, right? They drafted Penix, figuring he was going to learn from Kirk to sit the first year out, and now Penix is the starter there, and he's going to be the starter moving forward. Now you're looking to get rid of Kirk Cousins at this point, so obviously they're not going to invest that much money into Darnold. I wouldn't at this point. had he made a NFC championship, maybe even made it to the Super Bowl, we'd be talking a different story
Sure.
here, and saying, yeah, he's well deserving of it, pay him. That's just not the case. And I don't know if you watched the game, but actually watching that game, a lot of people were saying, well, his offensive line didn't help him, which is true. He had 9 sacks, but if you actually watched him, there was a lot of times where he could have thrown the ball away or thrown the ball in general and was just afraid to pull the trigger. I don't know
Yeah.
what he was seeing out there. And they were even talking about it on the commentary, saying, he had an opportunity to make a play. He just chose not to throw the ball.
It-
Um,
I don't know. I
yeah,
mean, that might be an unfair. Yeah, you're right. I mean,
but I don't fault fully the offensive line. I mean, some of the play comes from the quarterback and knowing when to get rid of the ball, and even the coaching staff of designing plays. If you know that your quarterback has no time, but they were saying his average time back there was about 3 seconds before he got sacked, which is about normal for a normal quarterback. I mean, you
right,
have really 3 4 seconds tops to throw the ball or make a play.
right. And also you can it was two bad games in a row. Like it was, I
Yeah.
mean, it was a complete failure against Detroit, who their defense is completely decimated, and I don't know how many times they got into the red zone and they failed in that game. So I mean,
Yeah,
like
and
it's
he
just
missed he missed that game. He missed some wide open throws to Jefferson
right.
against the Lions, and it was just he did not look good.
The Vikings,
Maybe
situ- the Viking situation. I mean, it's going to be such an interesting situation to look at this offseason too. And for fantasy purposes, I don't think that much changes if they were to just, let's put it this way. I mean, we'd be expecting JJ McCarthy to take over at some point if Sam Darnold was to come back, because the second he falters, they're going to call for him. But for fantasy purposes, like it's not like Justin Jefferson or Jordan Addison take that much of a hit. Uh, I mean, maybe Jordan Addison, if you know that a quote unquote basically a rookie quarterback is going to be starting, he takes a hit down. But Aaron Jones is going to be 1 year older. I mean, he'll be an interesting conversation in the offseason. I mean, it'll be really interesting to see what they do. I mean, but to your point, I know we were talking about this off air. So a lot of the Viking success has also been because of their defense, and maybe if they lose a piece or two, and if Flores leaves and goes and coaches somewhere else, how good are going to be the Vikings going to be next year?
Yeah, I mean they're going to be if they lose their defensive coordinator in Brian Flores, I think they're going to be starting from scratch again. Who are they going to get to replace him? He's great on the defensive side of the ball, and like you said, a huge reason of why they have 14 wins this year. Because if you noticed, they won a lot of games because of their defense this year.
Right.
There are a lot of close
12
games.
to 7,
Yeah, a lot
19
of
to
close margin of
14.
victory games that they pulled off. And in the NFL, a win's a win. So any way you can
Yeah.
get a win, I'll take it. I won't complain about it. But he's going to be a huge piece missing, and he's going to have big shoes to fill there. So I don't expect him to do as good next year. I could be eating those words next year. We'll see.
Yeah.
My buddy asked me this question though, and I'm going to ask you because
Sure.
you're on the same boat as me. What about a Sam Darnold reunion on the Jets? How likely do you think that could possibly be since he's a
Um,
free agent?
I think after those two performances, I would say much less likely. I heard about this a lot more. Like maybe right before and after the Detroit Lions game, but maybe to your point, that basically put the kibosh on that. Why would they? What the Jets need to do at this point is, if they're going to end up, whatever they're going to end up happening with Rodgers, they can't just get a bridge type of thing. They have to go young, and they actually have to develop a young quarterback. They
Yeah, I
have to.
agree.
Like it would be, if they want to actually be competitive in the long run, they have to do something like that. That might take a few years of, chugging it through. So yeah, I don't feel good about that.
But like, would you take so say you plan on drafting a quarterback this year, right? Which I really hope the Jets don't, but at this point, it almost kind of seems inevitable because I just hate wasting first round picks on quarterbacks because it never works out for the Jets. Um, but do you bring in a guy like Darnold, not just sort of bridge, but you draft a quarterback, you bring someone in like Darnold, and this is all speculative that Rodgers is gone. You let Darnold play and let this guy, grow under Darnold. And like you said, if things crap the bed, all right, well, we're going to bring this guy in and see what he has or just let him ride the bench. There's also Kirk Cousins out there who's going to be looked to move on from the
No.
Falcons. He's not a guy that I'm interested in, but
Right.
as far as a competent quarterback goes, to get someone in there to teach a young guy, I think it's hard, given the quarterback talent coming out of the draft this year. I can't think of a guy that I can say, you know what, we're going to plug him in from day one and he's going to lead us to success.
No, I don't think that's going to happen. But like presumably you can have somebody that you develop in some way that you eventually build up. I mean, it eventually happened with Bryce Young,
Yeah.
um, you know, but you have to actually develop. You have to see sparks. You have to see signs of greatness. You have to see. We're not quarterback whisperers or anything, but like whatever it was that is Zach Wilson wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
Now, I granted, like it was a bad team and bad whatever, but it just you saw nothing, like nothing out of that. He had maybe one really great game, and it happened to be on prime time against the Chiefs. Basically, that was it. It's just like that's the kind of thing that they would need now. If they had Sam Darnold as like a bridge quarterback thing, and let's see how he does. If he does great, then we kind of stick with it. Maybe not, definitely not Kirk Cousins. How's Billy and Anthony coming to you for the Jets podcast as we we talk about this? I don't know. We could commiserate as much as we want about it, but
Well, I
I
mean,
have a
you think about the quarterback landscape and just the whole league of where these guys could go. You got to look at who's going to be drafting quarterbacks. The Raiders, probably the Giants, um,
the
the
Browns
Patriots.
now with
Well,
the
Browns, yeah,
Achilles
that's a story in
situation.
itself.
Yeah,
The Browns. So you have a lot of quarterback needy teams who are picking early this year. I mean, I'm even wondering if the Titans are going to draft a quarterback, even though they spent that capital on Will Levis, recently.
they probably
So
will.
exactly. So there's not out of the realm to say they're going to take a quarterback. And um, I my big concern, at least when it comes to the Jets, is keeping our other role players there and keeping them happy, like Garrett Wilson.
Honestly, can I give you the best case scenario for the Jets? Seriously, would be that the best realistic scenario is they literally roll it back with Rodgers, because they basically pigeonholed themselves into doing so. But in the interim, they actually draft somebody who they actually like. Maybe they don't need to spend, maybe they trade back slightly for a guy that they're looking for, whatever. The guy gets a chance to play under Rodgers. If Rodgers ends up getting hurt, which will probably maybe will be likely, then there'll be no controversy. He comes in, he picks up, and however well that the player does. If not, he'll at least get a year in there. However well Rodgers does, he'll get one more chance to take the Jets to wherever he's going to take. I don't know if that's going to aggravate or not aggravate other players on the team and or whatever other coaching situation. I think that's number one. I think that's the most realistic, best possibility for them to do it.
I
Because
don't disagree with you
why do you
there.
need a bridge quarterback if you already have
Yeah,
Rodgers?
I don't
Otherwise, go young immediately.
I don't disagree with you there, and you make very valid points. And I'm almost hoping for that situation at this point because you're right. It is best case scenario for the Jets, especially with a new regime coming in, new coaches, new GM. Um, but that's also sitting in the back of my head is just this new GM coming in. Does he want to clean up shop, start from scratch, and build his own team the way he wants to, and say, you know what, you're not my problem, Rogers. See ya. I'm not the reason you're here, and we start from scratch. I don't know. I wouldn't be opposed to him being on the team next year at this point, especially given the options that are out there. I just want them to be competitive and I just want to see them start building for a better future. That's really all I care for.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Yeah, just to continue to little bit of a recap here. So, like we said, the Rams crushing the Vikings, Commanders beating the Buccaneers in a really great game, nice close game. Good on the Commanders for having a great season thus far. It's about to
Actually,
end, but good on the
I'm
Commanders.
sad about that. I was rooting for the Buccaneers. I like the Bucks.
Yeah, it was, and we've been Baker fans this
Oh
whole
yeah.
year. There's gonna be some interesting conversations about a couple Buccaneers players in today and in future episodes too. Eagles getting past the Packers there in a slugfest. The Eagles defense is great. Bills decimating the Broncos. We expected that. Texans really drubbing the Chargers. I did not see that coming. I thought the Chargers were going to win that handily. Completely wrong. Herbert looked bad, but
No,
I
that
think he's been dragged through it in the media a little bit too much,
you think
to be
so?
honest. It it was it was a bad performance, but I mean, it was like one really bad performance this year. He hasn't had one this whole year, you know?
I'm gonna. Here's the thing with Justin Herbert. I feel like it would have been a different story had he had Keenan Allen on the team still. Larry McConkey put up a performance for the ages. I mean, that guy, I think, solidified himself as possibly a first round pick next year in fantasy
Ugh, we'll
with that
talk about
performance.
that.
Yeah, we'll get to it at some point, but I'm just saying he had a performance of a lifetime there. But I think if he had better weapons around him, it would have been a different story. His wide receiver core is decimated. You know what Quentin Johnston, Joshua Palmer, Will Disley. So you got a lot of guys there that are hard to rely on. And his run game, beside added J.K. Dobbins, which just is not there either. Gus Edwards, is not good. Vidal not doing much, and Dobbins has got to stay healthy. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt, but he did not look good.
He didn't, but just remember they plussed up whatever it was 6 games from last year. Harbaugh is a great coach, and if his pedigree is any indication, they'll be competing for an NFC Championship next year. But you're
Yeah.
right, a real star wide receiver would really help them. I think it helped Lad McConkey too, like just take a little pressure off of him.
Oh, I
Um,
agree.
yeah, and then obviously the earliest game, the Ravens destroyed the Steelers. So a divisional round coming up. Texans, the
I feel
Chiefs.
so bad for the Steelers.
Oh yeah.
Their team, their team, like Mike Tomlin is funny, and I say that because it's a guy. So he's like the guy at work, right? So you have a guy that you work with who he just does the bare minimum, just does enough where he's coasting. He doesn't get noticed. He doesn't get promoted or recognized, but he doesn't get in trouble either. That's what Mike Tomlin is. He's just coasting by, playing 500 football, but he makes the playoffs every year, and that's what keeps him around.
So
Necessarily doesn't lead to
Mike Tomlin, the
success,
quiet quitter. Okay.
but 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 over the last few years they made the playoffs, and they get an early exit. It's just funny because they go, and every year they make it, they go like 10-7. So it's not even they're putting up fantastic numbers here where it's like 12-4 or whatever. They're just barely getting in, but it
But
works.
their quarterback play, I heard this on the media too. Their quarterback play since Roethlisberger was at his, let's say, primish or whatever, has been just abysmal. I
Well,
mean, from
yeah,
between
that's
from
true. That's
from
true.
late stage Roethlisberger to Mason Rudolph to Duck Hodges to to now Russ and
Josh Dobbs was 1 point, right?
right, etc. Like,
He
I
was
mean,
injured.
it hasn't been that good. It's been his. I think he's a great coach, and his coaching and motivation and etc. has gotten what would otherwise be a real below average team into the playoffs. If they end up, I feel like the Steelers, if Tomlin ends up staying, I feel like the Steelers would be a perfect place for um, one of those kind of bridge kind of quarterbacks to go.
Well, I think if he
Depending on if they
doesn't
stick with
retire, I
Russ,
think
but
that's where Rodgers ends up.
maybe
I do. I think if he doesn't retire, we could probably see him on the Steelers.
see how that goes. Ugh,
Did you see? Did you see the George Pickens interview? By the way.
I did not. Should I have?
So, oh God, yeah. So they asked him. After the game, they said, did your offense show signs of improvement throughout the year? He goes, yeah, absolutely. I saw signs of improvement. So they asked him, does that give you confidence going forward? He goes, nah. That's probably one
All
of the
right.
greatest interviews I've seen.
All
But
right.
he spoke it like it is. So I mean that team's a mess, man.
It's a mess, but again, it's a team that was, made the playoffs. So I
Yeah,
mean,
better than the Jets. So
yeah, that's true. Um, divisional round coming up. Four four games that at least appear to be at least on some of the betting sites to be lopsided, and one that's going to be close. So we get Texans at the Chiefs, Commanders at Lions, Rams at the Eagles, and Ravens at the Bills. The Ravens at the Bills is obviously going to be the big game. That's the last game. If I was a betting man, the upset that I would take would be the Rams over the Eagles, personally.
I like that. I like that a lot, actually.
Yeah. I've been high on the Rams all year now. Like they have these games where they just shut off, but then they're a great team and they're coached by a great coach. I mean, I was saying to you earlier in the year, like the Rams are going to end up in the NFC Championship game, and so
Yep.
like it's just I feel like the
You
Eagles
got to
have not
remember too, they have this experience. This is not new to them.
right.
So they're not going to crumble under this pressure. And going into it, they had no pressure. No one actually expected them to make the playoffs. So the
Right.
fact that they're doing as well as they are, they can just keep coasting.
Oh, you're right. Obviously we're not picking the Texans or the Commanders to upset the Chiefs or the Lions, but I wanted to before we jump into running backs, I wanted to get you on record here. Ravens at Bills. Who wins this game?
I think the Bills are going to pull this off. I think this is the year for Josh Allen. I could be wrong, but the Bills just look like the better team. They They're playing great football right now. And as a fun little thing here, and I wish the NFL would do this, to be honest with you, I feel like the winner of this game should be named MVP. I don't know how you feel on that, but I think whoever wins this game should solidify themselves as the
I
MVP.
honestly think the way that like I'm annoyed at how sometimes the national narrative goes. I think it should go back to like how they did it in 2003. They should be co-MVPs like they did with Peyton and Steve McNair
I
in
wouldn't mind seeing
2003.
that, yeah.
They both deserve it. They both deserve it. And the voting is done, so they can't take into I don't know if it's done, but they can't take into account anything that happens.
I
And
know.
also they could perform really well and lose the game. You know what I mean? So like
Well, I think
sometimes I
statistically, Allen had the better numbers this year,
Lamar had some
statistically
pretty
wise.
good numbers though.
Yeah, but
Like
I
he was
think
like
Allen.
41 and 4. I was
But
like
if you go back and look at Allen's too, though, I think they're slightly better than Lamar's. To be honest with you,
it's so close.
it
I
is
mean,
close.
I think it's funny the Ravens are actually favored by like half a point or a point or something in this game. I agree with you. I think the Bills pull this out. Um, I think they pull this out and we end up with the Chiefs and the Bills in the AFC Championship game again.
I mean,
So
I think that that'll be a good game. Obviously, I think that's what a lot of the
yeah,
fans want as well. And I think a lot of the fans want to see the Bills win, if that were the case.
yeah. Well, we'll see. We'll see how that one goes. And we'll see how right we are about the Rams. We'll see.
Little fun fact: the head referee for the Chiefs game this weekend.
Here we go. I don't want to hear this narrative.
It's facts. It's facts. It's not even like it's fake. The head referee for this week's Chiefs game, when he's the ref, the Chiefs are 6-0. Just keep that in mind.
Oh my
How
God.
about last thing real quick? How about the referee on the Bills game going up to Allen on the bench to apologize to him for the missed call? I've actually never seen that before.
I, I is that exactly what happened? I feel like there was.
Supposedly, yeah, because they missed that
Eh,
pass interference call in the end zone or something like that. But I mean, I've never even seen a referee go to the sideline to personally talk to a player while the game's
right,
going on. So that was
right.
confusing to me for a little bit.
Well, there you go. It wasn't Patrick Mahomes, so you know. So
No, they just talk on the field. It's all right.
I'm not even getting into this argument again about this fake narrative about the refs helping the Chiefs.
Come on,
Anyway,
I'm
let's
joking. I'm joking.
but not really. Anyway, let's move on. So we last week we covered running backs 1 to 12. Today we're going to cover running backs 13 to 24. And a couple honorable mentions and dishonorable mentions at the end. Just to remind everybody that this is in half PPR, and we are counting weeks 1 to 17. And when we talk about averages, which we're definitely going to get into today, we're going to mention why certain guys might be lower, but their average might be higher because there might be certain games they were injured and didn't play in. We're not counting games that you could have not started that player in the game that he said, but we will make a mention of it if it's relevant to whatever the conversation was. So just to catch everybody up real quick, running backs 1 to 12. Real quick, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson, Josh Jacobs, Kyron Williams, Devon Achane, James Cook, Alvin Kamara, James Conner, Chase Brown, and Chuba Hubbard. So coming in at number 13 is Joe Mixon. Coming in at a total of 219 points, just a point behind Chuba, who is at 12. And I mean, it doesn't say the full story here about Joe Mixon. I mean, he finished at running back 13, but he feels like he was much higher than that. Why? Because he missed 3 games this year. His average was basically up in the realm of like Kyron Williams and Josh Jacobs with his average. Really an unbelievable year for Joe Mixon. And this whole year we were kind of lamenting the whole passing situation for Stroud and Dell, whatever. They basically morphed into more of a running back, more of a running team. I think that given guys like Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley showing that running backs are maybe we're seeing a resurgence in later age running backs. Maybe Joe Mixon's going to be right up there again next year. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. And I'm going to go on record and say if he had played those 3 weeks, he probably finishes in the top 10 fantasy running backs this year,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
without a doubt. And it's funny because I know Cincinnati lucked out with Chase Brown, But when they let Joe Mixon go, I said, "What are you guys doing? Yeah, why are you letting this guy go?" Because he was probably one of the most consistent running backs in the NFL for the longest time, especially on
Yep.
that Bengals team. He was always good for, we'll say a touchdown, 100 yards, and give you about in fantasy wise 20-point average or so. Yeah, and every running back you're going to have a bad game here or there, but he was as solid as they come, and I was actually shocked Cincinnati let him go. But one man's trash is another man's treasure, and that's exactly what the Texans got out of him. And I think he exceeded their expectation, and everyone else's expectation this year in fantasy football.
Yeah, you drafted him as the running back 15. He finished at the running back 13, so you got some value there. And like we're saying, like minus the games that he was injured, like he really felt like the running back 6 or so.
Oh
Like, I
yeah,
mean, he really was great. I mean, he kind of let you down in your playoff weeks there, eight
he did
points,
have a
7 points, and
stretch.
4 points. But again, in terms of how starting running backs go and where your studs are, he definitely helped get you to the playoffs. And I mean, again, it'll be interesting to see how they do this next year. If they just roll it back and it's not like they, draft a significant piece behind them, I don't see why it's not more of the same. Um,
No,
you know,
I see them easily doing the same thing over, and that helps out CJ Stroud a lot too, man,
you're
because
right.
you don't have to depend on him now throwing the ball 40 times a game because you actually have a competent run game. And I think it actually can make CJ Stroud better and more dangerous.
Coming in at number 14, Jonathan Taylor finishing at 211 points, so about 7 points behind Joe Mixon. He's another guy here who the total points doesn't tell the whole story. His average is significantly higher than where he fell. Why? Because Jonathan Taylor was injured for 3 games this year. He's another one who would have finished like running back 6 or 7,
Yep.
and had playoff weeks especially. He definitely won you a championship. 10 points in week 15, 40 points in week 16, 27 points in week 17. The problem therein is, you drafted him as the running back 4, so finishing at the running back 14, given his injuries, and basically like he was pretty consistent. He's again, you started him basically every week. He was good, but he wasn't great up until the playoffs, and definitely not worth the draft investment that you had for him. Going forward, though, again, this is another example of if it's not like they're going to draft a significant piece behind him. I mean, you just kind of round it right back and roll right back again with Jonathan Taylor for next year. I mean, it's going to be Anthony Richardson. We don't exactly like running backs for running quarterbacks, generally speaking, for upside purposes. I mean, I know Derrick Henry blows that out the water,
I was gonna say
but
that narrative changed with Derrick Henry this year.
I know, but Anthony Richardson is not Lamar Jackson.
No, you're right.
So I mean, how do you? Obviously, he's not. Obviously, he's not going to be. He's not going to be drafted at running back 4 next year, given what happened here, and some other guys we could name and stuff. Where do you think, like, what second round back, in your
Yeah,
opinion?
so I don't think Mixon or not Mixon, Taylor next year. I don't think he's drafted in the top 5. We could easily name
Definitely.
Saquon, Henry, Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan top 4 right there. And this is gonna sound crazy, but I think everyone's gonna hop back on the McCaffrey train next year.
We'll talk about that.
uh, I just don't see Taylor being in that top 5 going into next year. But I think he's easily more of a, like you said, a second round back for sure.
Yep.
Top 10, yeah, 100%. Top 5, I feel like that's not gonna happen.
I'll be
And there
so
might
interested.
be
I mean,
some people that overvalue him. It could happen.
yeah, because he won people playoffs if you had him in your playoffs basically, and like if it'll be so interesting to see where we do, like when we set up our rankings and stuff and we actually see where he falls. I cannot see how we rank him any higher than like 10. I can't. Like, I mean, he might be drafted as such, but like he'll be a
No, see, I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you on that because you look at it, you look who's on there in the top 10 right now. Um,
you know why? Because guys who are in the top 8 to 10 ish, you're always looking at upside. Can this guy, is this guy going to carry me throughout the whole year? Is he that kind of thing? And again, before the playoffs, Taylor was good, not great, and he had the injury
yeah,
situation. So I mean, and he's not to mention the injury concerns in general on a team in which Anthony Richardson's going to be playing the quarterback. God knows they might be doing some coaching changes in the future. They were debating about that this past year. The one saving grace to me is that the AFC South is such a paltry division. You know, like it's their defenses are nothing to write home about. So I mean, that would be the only thing. Again, it'll be interesting to see where the rankings go. Yeah. Any other thoughts on him?
No, I agree with everything you said there.
Yeah. All right, let's move to number 15, which is this is gonna aggravate Mr. Perez here. All right, number 15, Aaron Jones, star running back for the Minnesota Vikings. He finished with 206 points, about 5 points behind Jonathan Taylor there. He was drafted as the running back 18. He finished as the running back 15, so returning a little bit of value. It's interesting to point out, like that's where he finished. He played every single game. There was not one game that was an injury. But I know that Anthony, you did not feel so happy with him. But looking at the final results, you think maybe you were a little bit harsh, or maybe walk us through that there.
I'm completely shocked that he actually finished at 15th, to be honest with you. I thought it was going to be a lot lower. Obviously with my draft approach, taking Aaron Jones when I did, I knew what I was going to get out of that. I think the more frustrating thing for me was his usage when it came down to the goal line. And it was every time they got to the goal line, they would throw the ball. They wouldn't hand off to Aaron Jones. They would throw the ball. And
So
it frustrated me
his
to
upside is
no
capped, right?
end because I'm like, first down, all right, throw incomplete. Second down, throw incomplete. Third down, you give the guy a run, and now it's fourth down. It's like, dude, and I watched a lot of their games this year, because I was heavily invested in Aaron Jones, and his numbers could have been so much better had they just used him better in the red zone, And I know Tommy's going to be laughing because he labored the fruit of Sam Darnold throwing those touchdowns on the goal line. It works, but I don't know. I just felt like he could have done a lot better, and I feel like they misused him when it came to that. He was good in the pass catching role too. I mean, he was great through the air as well. He gave you what you expected though. He was pretty consistent throughout the year, averaging 15, 16 points. Um
his average was 12.9
yeah.
points, right? But to your point, yeah, he didn't have it's not like there was maybe 1 or 2 weeks where he real busted, but I mean he
Well,
was
and
pretty good throughout the year.
there were 2 weeks though. He did start, but he came out of the game early because he did get hurt and he didn't finish the game. I know there was two.
I think that I know which week you're talking about. Yeah, week
Yeah, I
nine.
know
But he ended
there.
up playing the next week. So
Yeah,
yeah,
no, he played, but I know there's at least I think 2 games where he left
right.
early. Um, yeah, but other than that, I mean, he had a fine year. I just think he could have had a better year given the the red zone situation. That's the only thing that really frustrated me about that. But if you drafted him, see, my problem is I drafted him as an RB1. He was perfect as an RB2 situation there. So
Sure.
if I drafted him as an RB2, you made you out great with him. You couldn't expect anything more, to be honest with you.
Right. And well, I mean, maybe some people they would have like if they would have gone running wide receiver strategy, if they would have been decently happy if he like again, it depends on whatever your strategy was. Going
I
going
drafted him
forward,
in the I drafted him in the fourth round because my first 3 picks were all
right.
receivers. So I got Jones in the fourth round. So my return for him, yeah, was a good value.
Right. Which it was. And it ended up like that's why it's interesting looking at these final numbers. Maybe it hurt you less than it felt, but I
Yeah.
agree with you. If you watch the games, like and going his upside is capped given the situation there in Minnesota. And again, we're kind of mentioning it earlier. We don't really know how good Minnesota is going to be next year. They did not end the game. They did not end the year well. We're not sure the quarterback situation. We're not sure if some of the assistant coaches are going to be moved out. We don't know if some players are going to get traded. And Aaron Jones is going to be another year older. And I think Aaron Jones is getting close to where his age is actually like even now that we're accepting that older running backs can be good. I think he's older than Derrick Henry if I'm remembering. He's like 32 now.
Yeah.
I think 31.
Well, I think he's 30. I don't know if he's 32, but
Miss
I will say his situation going into next year, I don't like as much because if they keep and hang on to Cam Akers, remember they started to split a lot towards the end of the year with Aaron Jones and Cam Akers, and they were giving
right.
Akers even in the playoff game they were giving him a bunch of run too. So I'm always curious, wondering if it might become a split situation next year going forward,
Maybe.
and it
And
wouldn't
it's not
surprise
like
me.
And it's not like we like Cam Akers that much either. So maybe the Minnesota backfield becomes like a try to avoid it field, you know?
Yeah, and then
Uh,
like I said, a lot of these teams now are doing that where they're trying to get that
right,
dual back like the Lions do, and catch lightning in a bottle with that. But
right. Well, let's talk about to your point, one of these other backfields that is definitely like that. Um, and we can actually probably lump both of these players in for the sake of brevity here. So coming in at number 16, Bucky Irving, starting running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, finishing with 205 points. And like I said, let's lump in, it's part of the same conversation. Rachaad White finishing at running back 20, himself finishing with 174 points. Bucky Irving, there's no other way to say it. I mean, he was great and he got better as the year went on. It took a little while for them to realize whatever their two platoon situation was going to be, but both running backs were valuable, especially Bucky Irving closer to the end of the year. Um, I the way that I see this is very, very similar to the Lions situation that happened this year and last year for the Bucks next year. I don't think that they phase out Rachaad White. Rachaad White's been too good catching the football. He's too reliable, but they end up just using both backs. I don't see them. I mean, to some degree, it's a little bit of vulturing each other, but they're both so valuable. Baker's been so good. The Buccaneers offense is so good. I just see it being more of the same. To put in perspective, by the way, of how good this was. So Bucky Irving, you draft him as the running back 53, if you even drafted him at all, finishes at running back 16. Rachaad White, though, you drafted him as running back 13. He finishes at 20, but again, he had a missed game in there, and or some other games that you were kind of worried about injury situation, though. You think this is more of the same next year, or some people I was seeing online were just saying Bucky Irving takes over completely? How do you see that?
so I think that Bucky Irving looks like the better back. Um, but I also agree with you where I do think Rachaad White was valuable in that passing situation role, that you can't just off him and just give the full starting role to Bucky Irving. I agree with what you said. I think it's going to be more of a dual running back committee there, like the Lions do with Gibbs and Montgomery, and I fully expect that see that going forward, which is going to hinder each other's value, though. Uh, I do think that Bucky Irving is going to get the better end of that deal. I do think he's going to get a little more run, um, but I do think that they both provide value.
Okay. I agree with you. I think that um it's a little too bullish to suggest that he's just taking over the backfield next
Yeah,
year. Part of it was just he just looked really good though. I think that the way that their offense is, and again, we'll see how much the Bucks just run everything right back. And we'll talk about their wide receivers in an upcoming episode as well. But I mean, you didn't get the value out of White, although it's not like he killed you. He really didn't kill you, but Bucky Irving was
no,
really
I mean they
the
finished 1 point. Really, Bucky Irving was 12 average 12.8 points, and White
right.
was 11.6. So I mean they're
That's
not far
true.
off.
No, that's true. Um, yeah. So let's go to number 16. The aforementioned David Montgomery finishing at running back 17, which is extremely impressive considering that he didn't even play the last two games of the fantasy season, finishing with 203 points, just a two behind Bucky. Like I just said, his average is not commensurate with his performance here. His average was much, much higher. If he had played out, his average was 14.6 points. If he had played it out, he'd be somewhere around running back 9 or 10, maybe 8, depending on. He had an unbelievable year himself. Gibbs is the big electric guy, but David Montgomery is the tried and true. I mean, how many games in a row that he was getting a touchdown? Just so reliable. I don't see it slowing down. Regardless of what happens with the Lions this postseason here, I feel like they just go right back to the well, fire up the band again with both of these guys. Nothing to see here, right?
Yeah, no, that's not changing what they have going on there. They have a two-headed monster, and it's going to continue to be a two-headed monster. I mean, that's one of their huge keys to success, and that's got to be so good knowing that even if your running back two gets hurt, or you're running, so we'll say Gibbs gets hurt, you still have a running back one as your backup. That's
Right.
crazy to say, but Um, obviously it's going to hurt their value with them splitting the backfield like that. But one of my teams this year, they were both my starting running backs, my 1 and 2, and up until the end, I did great, and I had no problems with it. I could rely on them; they were going to get me points every week, and it was awesome. I just had to worry about them on a bye week, and that was it. So I definitely see the same trend going forward. I don't see that changing. I think Gibbs obviously showed that he's the better back, especially when Montgomery was not there, and you could see how high his ceiling is. So I look
Right.
forward to him at some point to seeing what he can really do when he's a standalone guy. But for now, don't change what's not broken.
I agree. I don't I mean I would take David Montgomery over a lot of other guys that we could name. I don't know how I don't like if I had to just blindly off the top of my head, I would say if I like ranking for next year, I would say David Montgomery would be among the top candidates for. I don't know if I would end up sticking him in running back one category, but maybe I should. I mean, he'd be right on that border of running back one or two. So
Listen,
like
if I
running back
draft
12
him
or
as an
13 or
RB
so.
two, I'm hecka happy about that.
Right.
I'm, yeah, I'm celebrating that. That's awesome.
Well, let's talk about a worse name. Coming in at number 18, Brees Hall. Finishing with 195 points, about 10 behind David Montgomery. Now his average was a little bit better than suggested because he didn't play one game, but not much. I mean, he's probably still would have finished as a running back too. So, um, you drafted him as the running back two, and he finished at the running back 18. So there's no way to slice it. It was a bad year. That having been said, I believe in the talent of Brees Hall. I think that it's so much. I mean, you and I have gone back and forth all about the Jets this whole year. It just depends so much on whatever that offense is doing, the kind of coach that they get. I could tell you this. I could say this right now. I'll name some names. You tell me if you'd take Brees Hall in the draft over these names. Okay.
Is this
Um,
this year or next year?
this coming year.
So could this coming up fantasy football?
Yeah. Obviously,
Okay.
Saquon,
I take Saquon.
Jameer Gibbs,
I would take Gibbs.
Bijan.
I would take Bijan.
Right. Okay. So I gave you three easy ones. Now let's get to some harder ones.
Okay.
Okay. Derrick Henry,
Ah,
half
listen,
PPR,
half point PPR.
half PPR.
Oh man. Listen, I didn't believe in Derrick Henry this year, and he proved me completely wrong. I just didn't see that happening, and I didn't think it was going to go as well as it did. Can it go as well as it could for a second year? I This is really hard, but I think I'd have to go Derrick Henry in this situation.
Okay. I'll give you two more quick names. Josh Jacobs.
I'm taking Brees Hall.
Okay. So that's a good line right there. And I'll just throw one more. Kyron.
I'm still going to take a chance on Brees Hall, I think.
Okay.
And the reason I say that,
I think I agree with you.
I'm smiling about this because I'm going to be so happy next year when I grab Brees Hall in the second round because that's where he's going to end up going.
I think you're right. I guarantee you Christian McCaffrey is going to be drafted ahead of him.
100%,
Guarantee
100%,
it.
because people are going to chase his potential. Not realize they're going to put his injury history aside, which I'm telling you right now, do not do.
I
If
agree
it's
with you.
anything you listen to on this show, I'm telling you right now, don't invest highly on Christian McCaffrey. No, I'm not saying that because I want to draft him in the third round. I'm telling you what it is. Look at his
Right.
injury history, look at what he's been through, and he's also getting older, and he's not played a whole year.
Right.
But he will go. I guarantee you, he will go in that top five.
And we'll get into a little discussion about San Francisco in a moment. So yeah, I couldn't agree with for all of our listeners here, I couldn't agree with Anthony's sentiments more. And I despite how this year kind of went for the Jets, and this has nothing to do with us being Jets fans,
No,
because nobody's more realistic about the Jets than we are. I just it's there's too much potential here for Brees Hall. The upside's too big. He's a three down bell cow back. It's now again depends on we'll see what happens with the coaches and stuff. But I think he identified the line there of where we're
yeah,
willing to take a shot on
yeah,
him.
and
So
last year, Brees with Zach Wilson, Brees Hall helped me get into a fantasy championship and win.
that's
Okay,
right.
we've seen what Brees Hall can do. Okay, we know what Brees Hall can do. So the Jets are a complete circus. I can't fault Brees Hall for their offensive mess. They had no identity on offense this year. They had no idea what they were doing on offense this year. Okay,
Right.
they were a complete mess. I will give Brees Hall the benefit of the, I will give Brees Hall the benefit of the doubt there. Because what the Jets
I
did,
agree with you.
they your weapon is Brees Hall. You should build your offense around Brees Hall. We'll start with that and then take it from there. They didn't do that. For whatever
No.
reason it was, they did not do that. Whatever. I think this is good because now we can draft him in the second round next year. I think he's completely undervalued, and I'm excited about it. So I will, I will be gladly taking him in the second round. No, I think he's going to have a way
I
better
hope
year
so.
next year. Also, all jokes aside, I think he's going to have a way better year next year. And I think whoever comes in to coach this Jets team is going to know that Brees Hall is one of your strengths on offense, and I think that they're going to fully utilize him and bring his potential out even more.
Yep.
At
I
least
couldn't agree more.
that's where my head's at.
Let's move to number 19, DeAndre Swift, finishing with 181 points, about 14 behind Brees Hall there. Now, this one is where there is no ambiguity about his average. He played the entire season. Now, he ended up returning some decent value. I mean, I was like not so high on Swift before the season. He was drafted as the running back 22. He finishes at the running back 19, and considering he played the entire season, he was pretty steady for you as a running back too. He did have some blow up weeks. He had one or two or three, some real bust weeks. I mean, honestly, just looking at his year, there was a point at which he was basically close to droppable. After the first 3 weeks, people were debating about if to drop him, but if you stuck through it, basically after that, he was real good for your team. My question is, I really am petrified of like I can't see this continuing in Chicago next year. There's some big changes coming. They're going to have a head coaching change. They're going to have a philosophy change. Williams is he looks to throw the ball a lot. Although maybe we have the Stroud thing where they morph into a running team next year. I don't know that. Swift has not been a guy who has had. This was his first year, to my knowledge, that he's played every single game. He's real bad injury history. What do you think about Swift going forward?
So, well, I'm going to start with going into this year. I was actually real high on DeAndre Swift. I was excited about him this year. I tried to get him in every league that I could because I had high expectations for him, given the year
Why
that
why
he
did
had.
why though?
Well, because given the year that he had with the Eagles prior, I thought he was fantastic on the Eagles.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean it felt like the O line crushing it for him though. No,
Yeah,
I
it,
mean
it could it could very well be, but I figured you know what he was getting. But also, I think he was splitting with Miles Sanders. No, Miles Sanders wasn't there last year, was he? On the Eagles?
no, he wasn't.
No. So when Swift was coming over to the Bears, and I knew that they were drafting a rookie quarterback, I'm like, oh, this is great for him because he's going to be the primary source of their offense, and let Caleb kind of develop into who he's going to be. And the run game would be important to helping him develop. And I was completely wrong about that. um, Swift, you're right. He was droppable at one point, or at least considered to be droppable at one point. Um, I'm actually shocked he finished as well as he did. I thought he was going to be a lot lower. I don't see it continuing. That offense needs a lot of work, especially with Caleb Williams, and it's hard to see that sustaining. To be completely honest with you.
Yeah, I know that Roshan, I mean, there was a period of time where Roshan was looking good. He was looking good as like a spot start kind of guy, and he's very talented himself. Maybe it'll be more of a two platoon, and like we are saying, kind of these vulturing two platoon committee running backs when they're in, marginally good offenses are not as good, as when they're on the Lions or the Buccaneers,
Yeah.
So
I think
maybe his value
Swift,
really takes a hit.
and like you said, Swift played every game, and he was getting carries. It wasn't like it was because of lack of carries or lack of
Right.
trying to get him involved in the offense. He just maybe their offensive line is not that good. I didn't really watch a lot of the Bears games this year, so I can't really comment on their situation. But from a numbers aspect, the numbers were there for him. He just didn't take advantage of it.
Right. Um, like we mentioned before, coming in at number 20 was Rashad White. We talked about him. So let's talk about number 21, and we'll talk about one of our honorable mentions. This is definitely same backfield. So coming in at number 21 was Tony Pollard, finishing with 174 points. And alongside, we'll talk about Tajay Spears, who finished as the running back 41 with 98.6 points. Tajay Spears is in our honorable mentions basically because of how he finished the year. Tajay Spears was injured for basically the entire first half of the year, in and out, a bunch of games that he was out for. But when he came in and he took over for Tony Pollard, man, did he crush it. He basically, if you were playing him, he probably helped win you some fantasy championships, which is interesting when we talk about Tony Pollard here because, you know, Tony Pollard, he drafted him as the running back 27. He finishes at the running back 21, basically on the back of a great season that completely faltered towards the end of it. So great season for Pollard, awful ending, awful start for Tajay, great ending. How do you see this backfield next year? Is this another one of these? Just now they're going to two platoon it themselves. Like what?
So here's what I feel about that. Tony Pollard had one of the easiest schedules for a fantasy running back to end the year this year. On paper, his last 3 games were literally the easiest matchups you could ask for. So when guys were playing him, say if I'm someone that had Tony Pollard and I saw that matchup and I'm in the fantasy playoffs, I'm all in on Pollard. He's playing the 30th ranked rush defense in the league. And like you said, he had the opportunity to perform there and he didn't. I think his last 3 weeks, 8.5 points, 7 points, and then he didn't even play the last week. Yep. Meanwhile, Spears had 24, 20, and then the last week, 11. But I think that Spears is the better back out of the two. I don't know how you feel about that.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if Pollard, a healthy Pollard, maybe not. I don't know.
Because and Spears gives you that pass catching aspect though, which I don't think Pollard gives you. You know what I mean? So you got Spears who can be that dual back, but I agree with you where I think if the Titans were smart, they would make that into a 2-man committee, kind of like the Buccaneers and the Lions. I think they're both good enough to provide value for that team and to provide value to fantasy if they're used properly.
Let me push you on that sentence. You just mentioned they're both, if they did that, they're both good enough to provide value for fantasy. What kind of value is that?
I think Spears would be 100%
low end running back too.
What's that?
Low end running back too.
100%. Even a consistent flex play, especially
really.
Think about it, if they're going to use a lot of his points, especially Spears, during the back end of the season, they came from receptions. He was killing it in the passing game. He was averaging 7-8 receptions per game in that span.
That's true. That's true.
If you're in a full point PPR league, and they're going to split time, and kind of like the Tampa Bay situation, like you mentioned, Rachaad White being the stronger pass catching back, so they're not going to stop utilizing him because he provides value in that aspect. I think Spears is the same thing. He can provide you with that value.
I know, but I don't think the offense is good enough. You know what I mean? I
agree with you there. I mean, they have to find an identity when it comes to the quarterback situation. And I think that's going to take some time for them to figure that out, especially if they draft a quarterback this year.
If I had to blind do it now, I guarantee, blind off the top of my head, I would probably have them ranked because I wouldn't know, to your point about how they organize it, how they do it. I'd probably have them ranked back to back at running backs 20 and 21 or something like that. Some ish, from 20 to 25, somewhere in there. I can tell you this: if I'm the guy who drafts, Tony Pollard or Tajay Spears, I'd kind of look at trying getting the other one, maybe, just as let's just see how week 1 shapes up. Let's see who's taking because maybe it'll be a crapshoot by that point. We'll judge it in the off season, but
if I had both of them on my team this past year, right, and say going into the final weeks of the season,
right,
I probably would have started both of them. I probably would have started one in the flex and probably Pollard as my RB2.
Well, Spears, you wouldn't have started for a while because of his injury situation.
That's what I'm saying. But I mean, I'm talking about the back end of the season here. We'll talk about the last 4 weeks of the season. If I had to make a decision, especially coming towards close to fantasy playoffs, it's hard to ignore what Tajay Spears did.
Yep.
Especially in the passing game there. And the way the NFL is shaping up to be, pass catching backs are just so much more valuable. You know,
Let me ask you this, just the last pushback on this. Like, if Tajay Spears, if they had the confidence in Tajay Spears that we're suggesting that maybe they have it now, I don't know, then why did they go above and beyond to try to bring in Tony Pollard? This past year they
I
had
think
Spears there.
I think it
Like, what
could
was
be a
their
very.
idea?
I think had Spears not finished or started the year hurt, I think we would have seen a Lions type of situation or a Buccaneers type of situation. I think that they would have both split carries, and I think they would have both provided some value.
Maybe,
But
maybe
Spears was hurt. Spears didn't get that opportunity.
that's true. I'll be this that'll be the Tennessee backfield will be a really interesting conversation going into next year.
I mean, think
And we
about
we
it.
mention it all the time. These amorphous kind of backfields. At some point, some guy will emerge, but if it doesn't happen that way, like we said, like their offense would have to improve for it to be a fantasy valuable situation for two guys to be valuable.
I listen. I agree with you 100%. Let me ask you this quick question though. When it comes to Pollard, he played for the Cowboys, right?
Mhm.
And he at one point was playing behind one of the best offensive lines in football. And what did he do when he got that opportunity to be the full-time Cowboys starter?
Right. Well, he did have that kind of injury situation though. Like
And he's
he
gonna,
and
and unfortunately, he's gonna continue. Like injury hurt him at the back end of this year, and who knows? Maybe the reason that
that's
he had
true.
bad games was because he was playing hurt. We don't know. You know what I mean? He could have had something going on. Was just like, oh, I'm good to go. Really, he wasn't. I mean, he didn't play the last week of the season. He was dealing with some aches and pains. I know that towards the end of the year, they were listed on the injury report. Um,
Yeah, that's true.
you know,
Uh,
it it's tough. It's one of those backfields where I'm going to be cautious about, but I'm also going to kind of keep my eye on because there is some intrigue there. There is. I mean,
no, you're right.
you
And
can't
also
ignore
to
what they did.
and also to your point, like if it's like a backfield that we're halfway, a little scared because we're like, we don't know how it's going to go. We're going to see what it's at, guys, whatever. At some point, there's going to be come a point in draft season where ADP falls low enough where you're like, all right, I'll take a shot on these guys. So I mean, at some point, people are going to end up with it.
I mean,
Um,
if you drafted Pollard this year, you're probably drafting him to be your RB2.
if you draft, but he was running back 27, so maybe you were taking a shot on him as your running back three. Maybe if you started wide receivers, he was your running back two. And again, like the way that it worked out for most of the year, you were happy until the playoffs. But yeah, like it was it's such the way, to your point, the way that Tajay Spears ended the year changes the whole thing completely.
Yeah.
Like the way that we think about it.
And think about it like this: if they don't decide to sign a quarterback or draft a quarterback, and for some reason roll with Will Levis going into next year, I've now fully expect that Will Levis was using Spears as his safety blanket. I can't see why that wouldn't continue on to next year if Will Levis is the quarterback
Right.
because he had success with it.
No, you're right. Uh, it'll be a very interesting conversation.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. Um, let's go. Let's move on to another double-headed backfield here. So we'll mention Najee Harris, who finished as the running back 22, and we'll mention Jaylen Warren, who finished at the running back 40. He's in our honorable mention category. So Najee Harris, he's about as plotting and tried and true as you could get. He's your low-end running back too. That's what he got you this whole year. Played every single game, finished with 173 points. You drafted him as the running back 23, finishes as the running back 22. About as there it is. There's your exactly what you got. Now it's worth pointing out here now for Warren. So, and we kind of mentioned Warren a lot during pickups and other stuff throughout the year. So basically, after the Steelers had their bye in week 9, Warren was a solid low end running back too. Had one bust week in week 15, but very, very solid, very reliable. And a lot of times we watch these Steelers games and Warren looks really great. I know there was a thought for this year. We're going to kind of see what happens. Maybe Harris or maybe Warren gets shipped out of Pittsburgh this particular offseason. I'm not sure how that goes. Um, but if they roll it back and it's the exact same crew, Harris and Warren, and Mike Tomlin is still the head coach, This is what it's been for basically the last 2 to 3 years with the Harris and Warren double-headed experience. Harris slightly more upside, and Warren your safe floor. I mean, why would it be any different
Yeah,
next year unless something changes?
I agree with that. And I think that they both can have more value if they get their quarterback situation figured out as well. I think if you get a reliable quarterback in there, you'll start opening up your pass offense more. It's obviously going to benefit the running backs in that situation. Yeah, you're 100% right. They gave you what you asked and what you needed them to do when you drafted them at their position. Maybe
The
it's
problem with these guys is that there's very, very little upside for both of them. Very little upside. Maybe a little bit more for Harris, but like what you're getting. So meaning maybe if you're taking some shots at some more volatile players that you're grabbing ahead of them, at wide receiver at the running back position, and you need a little bit of stability, Harris is the perfect play for you. But
yeah.
you're not like he's not winning you single-handedly a week or your championship or anything like that. And neither is one. Maybe Warren, but Harris would have to not be there. So unless Harris gets
And
traded
Harris
out or
does not
something,
get hurt. Harris is as solid as they come.
he's as solid as they come. Um, again, which could be bad depending on if you want solid out of your fantasy situation. Then there you go.
Well, think about
That's
it.
what
If
you get.
you say if you don't have a consistent flex player, right? But you're looking for someone that's going to get you 10 points every week at least, why not fill that void with Najee Harris, knowing that he's going to get you at least 10 points every week? I mean,
You're right. Well, not when I drafted him as the running back too.
well,
As
yeah. I
as a
mean,
running back too.
so
But
if you
yeah,
hamper your expectations, like you said, you draft him as an RB3, or
right,
you draft him where you kind of need him to go, which will be RB3 bye week fill
right,
in a flex play. He's going to give you consistent points.
right. Oh, Pittsburgh will be interesting to talk about. Um, let's move on. So coming in at number 23 is J.K. Dobbins, finishing with 166 total points, but doesn't say the whole story here. So he had a 4 week period where he just did not play. So his average is 13.9 points, basically putting him at the borderline running back one, running back two. He had a few games in there that, like, I mean, God knows where he would have finished if he would have played the whole year, but you drafted him as the running back 43. So he returned unbelievable value. And the situation there was, I mean, we were cautious about it. Everybody in the fantasy community was cautious about it, considering the injury situation. But he went and took those expectations and completely blew it out of the water. Gus Edwards ended up playing a very distant second fiddle to Dobbins. And you even saw it like Dobbins goes down. We thought he was out for the year. He comes back for one game in week 17, completely supplants Gus Edwards. We thought that was Gus Edwards' chance to shine. Didn't happen. No Vidal Sassoon. It was just J.K. Dobbins. So he ended up coming back and on a team in which it's Harbaugh at coach, and they're running the ball as much as they are. I think J.K. Dobbins is raring to go for at least one more great fantasy season next year. Do you agree with that?
I agree, but at the same time, I feel bad for Dobbins, right? Because his potential's there. He has the makings to be a great running back. The problem with him is he cannot stay healthy, and you know that.
That's true.
And you
Yep.
know that going into next
I'll
year,
have higher risk.
yeah, 100%. And do I think he could have finished in the top 12 this year? I think it would have been close if he didn't get hurt. I don't know if he would have made it to the top 12. I think he would be around there. Um, I just I want to root for the guy. I was excited to see him come back and become the Chargers lead back. I was glad he was given that opportunity. I have no faith in him staying healthy for a full year and playing a full season.
This is a perfect example of like because Najee Harris and J.K. Dobbins finished back to back here. And they finished back to back basically because J.K. Dobbins missed 4 games. But this is a perfect example to illustrate your point. If I was looking for upside from my running back 2 selection, Dobbins would be the pick. If I was looking for safety, Harris would have been the pick.
Yeah, I agree with that
Right.
100%.
This is, and you have to judge it by what's on your team. Like how volatile are you going? Did you go wide receiver early? Whatever. That's the perfect example. I don't like, again, just judging by how the team goes. If he stays healthy, he's going to be a value pick wherever he
100%.
goes in the
Yeah,
draft next
I
year.
agree with that. And I agree with what Tommy was saying too. Um, where he could have a potential to be a top back. I just,
Right.
given his injury history, when he goes down, you're holding your breath because at this point you're like, well, how long is he going to be out for? Because you know it's going to be an extended period of time with him, unfortunately.
Right. Well, it'll be good. It'll be good for the times that it lasted. And
If I'm the Chargers though, and I'm probably looking because, like you said, Edwards had the opportunity to become the guy that failed. Sassoon, probably not happening.
that failed.
So Harbaugh being the coach that he is and being a run heavy offense, they might look to draft someone or pick someone up in free agency this year. I wouldn't be surprised, especially
Maybe.
given Dobbins' injury history. I mean, if I'm in that organization, that's what I'm doing. But I don't get paid to coach.
Well, I end up they like to our conversation from like they end up going wide receiver. Maybe they need another star wide receiver. I mean, maybe they roll it back with the running backs. They
I
got.
think, listen,
I
I
mean,
wouldn't be surprised if Keenan Allen goes back. I wouldn't. I think that's even rumored to be happening, to be honest with you.
maybe that might take away a little bit of Lad's
Yeah, because
the way
now
that he plays.
you know Keenan Allen's good for 13, 14 receptions a game if he goes back to
Yeah,
Herbert.
let's see how that goes. Yeah, but we'll see how. I mean, again, J.K. Dobbins round the bases, but again, to Anthony's point, big
You
injury
have to
risk.
draft him, ex- like you said, the high upside's there, but there's also big risk with that, and you got to draft according to your roster. Like how Tommy drafted him was perfect. You didn't draft him to be a starting running back. You drafted him to be a backup and a buy replacement, and it turned out to be more.
Right.
So
He and
that was a
again,
perfect situation.
and this pat now you're not going to be able to draft him at running back 43 this coming year. So
No,
that's so like you're going to be drafting him somewhere in the running back, in the running back 2 realm,
yep,
which
I
is a
agree.
much higher cost to be paid for what the risks that you're going to be getting. So again, judge how high you think the upside could get, and we'll talk about that in the off season.
Who would you take in this situation then for your RB2?
Oh, here we go.
Are you gonna go? So you got Rashad White or J.K. Dobbins?
As my running back 2, assuming I don't have Bucky Irving, then I would go Rashad White. I think because I just think that the Bucks, you know, we already talked about it. Like it's just I'm more risk averse depending on how things go. Honestly, for me, again, since you're talking to me now, we'll get into draft strategy at some point this offseason. There's almost no scenario in a non-full PPR league where I don't leave with like 2 top tier backs,
Yeah,
whether it's rounds 1 and 3 or 1 and 2. There's almost no scenario. So Dobbins is going to be going probably after when I would be investing early in backs anyway. So it won't be on my radar. You ask me personally. That having been said, if those are my options, I would go Rashad White. That would be my advice to people.
my last one is DeAndre Swift or J.K. Dobbins.
Um, for next year, I might go Dobbins.
I agree with that.
Like,
I was gonna say I'd actually pick Dobbins in that situation, even
right.
though the high risk.
That
I
would be the
think,
upside that it would be worth it.
yeah,
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Lots of fun. Um, let's move on to the final running back in the top 24. Rico Suave, ladies and gentlemen. Rico Dowdle, running back for the Cowboys, finishing with 162 points. And he missed one game, but that does not tell the story, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, it took a while to really like to pick this up, but at some point, man, he just took over and he's the guy. I mean, yes, he did not, he had some dud games in there, but he became the guy. He was 58,000 times more talented than Ezekiel Elliott this year. Okay. I'm not talking about years past. I'm talking now. And the Cowboys, like, if they just would have stuck with him from the beginning, God knows how well it would have ended up becoming. Now, I feel like that's the end of the Cinderella story because there's no way Dallas goes into next season without having a better running back situation. I can't see any scenario where that doesn't happen, but we all know Jerry Jones. I mean, he likes to, say I told you so, and prove that he doesn't want to do things when he doesn't want to do them. So if they end up rolling back with a similar backfield where it's Rico Dowdle and then whatever other backup running backs, and there's no Ezekiel Elliott, I would take Rico Dowdle over J.K. Dobbins then
Yeah.
if that was my options. But assuming that not a running back comes in, what do you think there's any way this doesn't become like a crowded backfield with some other back coming in, or what do you think?
Ah, so Jerry Jones took a lot of heat this offseason, right?
I'm
Because
not
one of
getting.
their biggest weaknesses going into this year was the running back position. And who was out there in the running back market
Yep.
realistically that the Cowboys should have at least made an offer to? Derrick Henry.
Yep.
And, I listen, and I'm not even a Cowboys fan, but I was mad for them that they didn't even bother to make an offer to him. I'm just like, oh, we don't really need him. And look how he did on the Ravens. Anyways, um, I do fully think that the Cowboys are going to look to draft a running back this year. Um, and you know who I think that's going to be?
Uh, Jonte,
Yep.
you think he's going to go to
I
Dallas then?
I think he's going to go to Dallas. I think Dallas has the 12th overall pick this year.
Interesting.
I believe if he's there, he's going to the Cowboys. And that sucks because, like you said, now that Cinderella story with Dowdle is
That's the
100%
end
over.
of the story. Yeah,
That, yeah, I mean, John T, it looks like he's going to be a heck
he's
of a running
great.
back to come. So, I could easily see them drafting him in that position. But then again, you look at it as well, we do have Dowdle, and look how well he finished the year. First half of the season, we're talking about possibly dropping this guy because he was just abysmal. You know what I mean? He did absolutely nothing the first half of the
Well,
year.
he had a good 1 or 2 weeks, but the problem was it wasn't just the production. It was like, God, why are they still rolling with Ezekiel
Yeah,
Elliott?
listen, I
That's what it
agree with
was. It
you.
was like, oh,
He had one good week before the bye week where he had 18 points. Besides that,
right,
it was all maybe well, I say he averaged maybe 5 points prior to that 18-point game. But the
right.
second half of the year was a completely different story. Like you said, he the second half of the year is why he finished in the position that he did this year.
No, you're right.
And he crushed it, and he looked great. Now would I roll with him next year? Yeah, I'd probably choose him over Dobbins if that were going to be the case. If he was going to be the full time starting running back, I just unfortunately don't see that happening
I agree
next
with
year.
you. There's
I
no
don't.
way they don't address that position.
No, and I do think that Ashton is going to get drafted by the Cowboys. But then again, like you
We'll
said,
see.
this is Jerry Jones. He could be sitting there waiting for them, and they're going to go pick some defensive lineman. I have no idea. You know. um,
Well, and they're going to have a new coach next year too, so it'll be interesting to see like whatever that influence is going to be, whatever that coach is. Um I I agree with you. I'll tell you this though, in any scenario, if they don't address that position by some horrible, like if they don't bring some guy in, and like let's pretend they don't draft John T, and let's pretend they bring some guy in or whatever, anything that they do will is going to bring Rico Dowdle's thing down, because it took him getting the work and becoming the primary guy to basically become an RB2. So very little upside on an offense like that. Having been said, I mean, Dak was out for most of the year, so maybe their performance goes up when Dak plays. So I mean, lots of unknowns here. Will be interesting to see how the draft goes and how free agency.
Yeah, I mean, given the top 12 picks, right, for the draft this year, if you go back and look at the top, we'll say the top 12, the only team that I could see that could possibly draft or look to draft him would maybe be the Bears. Maybe if they decide, you know what, this guy's way better. Well, I mean, he's probably is better than Swift. Um, if they say, you know what, we just want to move on from Swift, we're going to draft this guy. I don't see
You're
the
talking about
Bears
John
doing.
T. You're talking,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
100%. Other than that, I don't see all these other teams already have pretty much solid running backs or need a quarterback.
right. Well, yeah, then maybe you're right. I mean, he's um, it makes sense, but again, Jerry Jones. So we'll see what he does. Just to put a button on Rico, I mean, like we said, like if the first 3 games definitely, but maybe up until week 7 or 8, he had the bye and then he didn't play a game. But after that, he was pretty real good for your team. and you drafted him as the running back 44. If you didn't end up dropping him, he ended up being pretty good, pretty good for your team, finishing at the running back 24. So there we go. That's the top. Go ahead.
I gotta ask this. I'm sorry. I know we're gonna talk about it later in a later show, but I gotta ask now just to get an early prediction. If the Cowboys draft him, is he in a fantasy draft next year? Do you think Ashton is a first round pick?
Yes. Yes.
I agree with that. That's all I'm gonna say. I agree with that.
Yes. I
I
don't know
just
where he would. I don't know off the top of my head if I would slot him ahead or behind certain guys.
but
I
he's
think that I think that Gibbs and Bijan is just locked ahead of that. But yeah, I agree with you. He would be right up there. Yep.
it would be tough though. Would you draft him over Christian McCaffrey?
Yes. Yes. And you know what? Let's. I want to get to that. Let's keep moving on because I have so much. I want to ask you so many things about this Christian McCaffrey thing. So let's move on. Let's get to some of these other names. So like we just mentioned, Rico Dowdle, that's running back 24. We mentioned already a couple of guys in the honorable mentions who are part of these backfields. Let's mention some of the other guys who we haven't mentioned. So Kenneth Walker finishing at running back 26. Um, and with 158 points. But again, that does not tell the story here. I mean, his average was 14.4 points. So again, like low end RB1, high end RB2, really great for the weeks that he played. The problem was he just didn't play every week. He got injured. He was in and out the lineup. And you know, it's funny if you had Zach Charbonnet and Walker, you were happy because you could just plug in Charbonnet, who had a great year as well in Walker's absence for those weeks. Um, Overall, you were disappointed for the year, considering you drafted Walker as running back 16. But for the games that he actually played, you were very happy with. Um, there's no way next year I don't if I go and draft Walker, I don't draft Charbonnet. There's no way. No way I don't leave that draft without him. But we'll talk hand.
I'll keep this short. I think
Yeah.
next year it's going to be a split backfield between the two.
I disagree with you. We'll have such an argument about this in the
No,
offseason.
that's fine, but that's going to be my stance on that. I 100% think Charbonnet earned that split,
Okay.
given what he did at the end of the year.
Okay. Okay. We'll see how that comes together. A couple other honorable mentions: Tyrone Tracy, who finished as the 20 running back 28, and you drafted him as the running back 58. So I know a lot of people left the Giants backfield for dead. If you and he might have been droppable for the first, it definitely was droppable the first 4 or 5 weeks. But basically, from week 5 on, he was a solid running back two, solid running back two. Again, it was disgusting watching the Giants offense. Tommy's not here that we can't laugh about this with him, but he held up his end of the bargain. Solid running back two, didn't sink your team in the Najee Harris category of plodding through. Again, on a bad team, we'll see his maybe if their offense improves, maybe we'll see some upside happen next year. I don't know how fast it'll improve, but we'll find out.
Yeah, he's the starter moving forward, and
Yeah.
I'm actually excited for him next year.
Jerome Ford finished at the running back 32. This is an interesting one considering that it was Chubb was not back for a while, then he was back, and then he went back out again. But then, you know, at some point when Ford just completely took over back again, which happened right before the fantasy playoffs, week 15, 17 and a half points, week 16, 21 and 0.6 points. And then week 17 was a dud. But next year, I mean, Chubb got injured again. Ford, unless they draft a running back, which they're not going to do with the second overall pick, unless they bring in somebody, Ford looks like he's going to be the guy next year. Again, this is going to be one of those low upside, plotting running back twos. Again, safety right here, right?
Yeah, I agree. I
Yeah.
absolutely agree with that.
Let's talk 2 seconds about a guy who I don't want to spend any more time on than I have to. So finishing as the running back 38, Amir Abdullah, star running back for the Las Vegas Raiders. There's no conversation to be had about his, this season, except after their bye week at week 10, he was basically a running back two for your team, especially in the championship 3 weeks, week 15, 16 points, week 16, 17 points, week 17, 16 and 22 points. I think Tommy wants to like, I don't know if he's tongue in cheek or sarcastic about this. He thinks that Amir Abdullah is a relevant player coming into next year. I think that this is nothing. The Raiders are gonna. This is nothing to talk about. Nothing to see here. What do you think?
I think if the Raiders were smart, they would draft Gianti with their
Okay,
first pick. Okay.
not try to roll with McCormick or anything.
I listen. I like Sincere. I think that going into next year, he should get the starting role over Amir. Given the sample size that we saw from him, he looked like the better back. And I think you should give him the opportunity to see if he can maintain that role next year. I think it should be his job to lose. Put it that way. Well, I'll just make it easy. It should be McCormick's job to lose going into next year. With that said, I know Tommy might be a lot higher on Abdullah than I am. I have very minimal faith in him, and
Yeah, yeah.
just the Raiders running situation, and even going into next year, their plan is to draft Shedeur Sanders. I'm probably staying away from that backfield. It's going to be real tough sledding.
I agree. I think the Abdullah thing, it's just a novelty for being like, he's a running back you would not have thought who won you your championship, basically. Other than that, there's nothing really to write home about this.
No.
Jalen Warren, we mentioned, Tajay Spears, we mentioned, and now let's talk about the San Francisco backfield. So we got two guys in the honorable mentions. That's Jordan Mason and Isaac Guerendo. And our first guy in the dishonorable mention, Christian McCaffrey. So, so let's just catch people up. Jordan Mason took over from McCaffrey for the first half of the year, was unbelievable, was like the running back 5 or something through the first 8 or 9 weeks. Then Jordan Mason goes down, and Isaac Guerendo takes over, has a great 2 or 3 weeks, and then Isaac Guerendo goes down. And then that's the end. There was like at some point there was not too many backs that were going to take over after that. No Patrick Taylor, whatever. I said this on the prior show, and I want to say it to you just to get your reaction to this. Okay. I talked about it with a bunch of different coaches. I'll just keep it real specific to the Christian McCaffrey situation. I've had it up to here with coach speak. I don't want to hear about it. I'm going to ignore it completely this offseason. What was that, Kyle Shanahan, leading right up to the season, where no, he's good a day before the year started. No, he's good to go. He's fine. He's going to play against the Jets. It was going to be, he's fine. He's fine. He's fine. 3 weeks into the season, he hasn't played, and he's getting second opinions in Germany off of whatever happened to him. How does that not result in some kind of an inquiry? The NFL, like malpractice, like what was that? So any thoughts on that?
Well,
Like,
listen, I Jordan Mason threw them under the bus after that Jets game when he said he found out Friday that he was going to be playing, and everyone was like, "Wait, what did he say?"
right.
That's the first
Forgot
thing.
about that.
That's the first thing I said to one of my buddies. We were talking about it, and I'm like, "That's crazy to me how the NFL does not hear that and not look into that and being like, wait a second, you guys are playing around with the injury report, then knowing that this guy was going to be the starter, knowing that McCaffrey was going to be out." Um, but I think they ended up looking into it and found no malpractice. He was being untruthful, and he knew that there was bigger problems with McCaffrey. I just didn't think he wanted to give that away. And it wasn't so much from a fantasy perspective. I think it was just, well, we don't want to give defenses. We want them to still plan for Christian McCaffrey possibly playing. You know what I mean?
But this, I got to stop you there because I was all with you. Like, I know you're just saying what they said, but I had this conversation with Tommy. Like, 99% of the time this level of we're not gonna declare what we're doing because we want to hold our hand close to the vest. We don't want people to prep for the it's all that's baloney. Like you're not fooling. First of all, you're not fooling anybody, and second of all, it doesn't affect. I'm telling you, as somebody who played football, that kind of a thing doesn't affect how defenses are prepping for you. I'm telling you, it
That
doesn't.
was the point that I was going to get to was I don't buy into any of that. I think it's nonsense, and I think it shouldn't be allowed, to be honest with you. If the guy is hurt, the guy is hurt. It is what it is. But also the problem is too, and I know we've spoken about this before, is now that betting is permitted, it changes a lot of things, man. It does. Money is the root of all evil, right? They say. And especially when it comes to sports betting, it's going to impact the way people do a lot of things. And that's just my personal opinion on it. I know everyone feels differently about it. Um, no, but I think going forward, I think teams need to be more straightforward. Hey, look, this guy's not playing. It is what it is. Like you say, you're done with coach speak, and I agree with you there. But like someone's, for example, Antonio Pierce on the Raiders, right?
Oh, I brought this up with Tommy too. Go ahead.
Sincere's going to be the guy. We're going to roll with him, and he did
And then
just that. And
and
he
he did
did
right, but he
just
was the same guy who said, "Oh, Zamir White's our guy. We're gonna roll it. He's gonna be
listen.
amazing," and he
He did
didn't.
just that.
So I mean, what I'm saying is like it's like that weatherman, like half the time, oh, 50% chance of rain. Okay, I could say that.
I think
50%, like, okay.
your logic is correct in what you say, and your opinion is correct in what you say. I just think that a lot of these coaches, though, in their minds, think that they're gaining. If they think that they can gain the slightest competitive advantage by saying this guy may or may not play, they're going to do it.
I, fine.
And
But
the statistics might prove that you're right. It proves that it doesn't matter how defenses game plan for. But I think in a coach's mind, well, we're kind of throwing them off by saying maybe he's playing, maybe he's not playing. You know what I mean? Like it's dumb, but
but whatever, I mean, whatever 0.001% you gain in a competitive advantage for something like that, you lose it in respect slash every other thing that, and everything else that you're saying, like
well,
fans and moneyed
I agree.
interests or whatever. And, just to bring it back, like, just to bring it back to that, like, it's not like you're going from, oh, our starting quarterback is Anthony Richardson and our backup is Joe Flacco. That might be something where it's like, all right, I could see that's a vast different, but running backs or like if it's like it's just too much. And for it to pretend like not, and also this is the main thing I wanted to just put a button on this. To go from nothing is wrong to not playing for 8 weeks. That's the point. It's not like we're not sure if he's going to play. If you're not sure, then that means he's good to go after that week then. So that's all. I just like I've had enough of
Well,
like
they should have put him on the IR to start the year. They should have, and that would have caused a lot, saved a lot of problems for a lot of people. They didn't do that, but you knew that there was a serious problem once he did go to Germany to get a. Once they said he was going to Germany to get a second opinion, you knew he was going to be out for an extended period of
oh
time.
yeah. All right, so let's talk about the fantasy implications of this. So if anybody doesn't remember, Christian McCaffrey used to have a different backup running back who was always our pick to go when McCaffrey goes down, Eli Mitchell. He goes down basically the same time that McCaffrey goes down prior to the season too. So leading up to the season, we're like, okay, we don't really know what the backup situation is. But when we started hearing these whispers about McCaffrey, now all of a sudden Jordan Mason becomes a valuable pickup because Mitchell went down. So then Mason becomes a good player throughout the year. He goes down, then the next man up, Guerendo, who's the fourth string running back, comes in, has great. After Guerendo goes down, like we said, Taylor was the fifth string running back. That was the straw. He just did not perform. So now basically we're going into this offseason where Anthony and I are basically we're in 100% agreement that Christian McCaffrey is about to be overdrafted this coming year. I'm going to be petrified of the injury situation. I don't care where he's going to, there's going to be a point at which he gets drafted that we'll be interested that it won't, that ADP will never happen. So my question to you, Mr. Perez, is what happens with these three other backs, Eli Mitchell, Jordan Mason, Isaac Guerendo? Uh, do some of them get traded? Who would you take as the backup? Because if you're leaving with McCaffrey, you better make sure you get a backup. So how do you handle that?
I'll be honest. I'm probably if I'm drafting McCaffrey, okay, I'm 100% drafting Jordan Mason as his backup. I feel like he definitely earned that role. Um, I could easily see them moving on from Mitchell, maybe trading him or eventually just maybe even leading him to be cut. Unfortunately,
And
but I could.
Guerendo?
And I was gonna say, dude, I'm gonna be honest with you. Later in the draft, I'm probably looking to draft him and keeping him on my bench somewhere. If I'm a team that didn't get McCaffrey or Mason, because they've all proven that if Mason gets hurt, Guerendo can obviously carry the load. If McCaffrey gets hurt, which I feel like at this point is almost like Dobbins, it's going to be inevitable for a game or two. You got Mason. You're going to need to draft a handcuff for McCaffrey 100%. I agree with you there. Um, it's a scary situation now, though, man. It really is. I just don't know how McCaffrey comes back and performs to the standard that he has been performing at, especially missing pretty much this entire year and the injuries that he was dealt with and is coming back from.
Yeah. But you and I mean, we don't want to just derail the rest of this little conversation about this, but I mean, this is going to be a conversation that we have the entire off season where he slates in. I mean, we'll start getting more into our rankings, as the off season goes on, we see how the draft goes, etc. But there's going to be a point at which we'd recommend to draft him, but I can't see ADP falling that far for that to happen. Like we said, there's any number of these names that we'd rather have over McCaffrey at this
You
point.
got to understand too, like look how much McCaffrey was used on the Panthers to begin
Right.
with. I mean, they beat him to the ground. He's what, 20, is 27, 28 years old, but he's got a lot of miles on him. So it wasn't like, he's not a spring chicken anymore. These
Right.
injuries are going to start to pile up, unfortunately, and especially
He's,
because,
he's older than Saquon. Yeah.
yeah, but I don't think he's 30 yet, though.
No.
He's up there, but he's not 30. But like I said, he has a lot of miles. He was the entire Panthers offense for how many years?
Right.
Leading the league, he had 1,000 yards rushing, 1,000 yards receiving. The guy's a great back. I don't want to take anything away from him talent wise. It's just now with older age and injury, in a fantasy perspective, he's a guy that's going to be hard to trust.
To put a button on it, it's just to your point. It's just where are you willing to draw the risk for whatever the reward will be, and then you just judge the other guys that you would think to have it over him. Just
Would you go this year, given the year that he had, and given the McCaffrey situation? Are you going Breece Hall over McCaffrey next year?
That's a great line there. I think I would go Breece Hall. And what's interesting is, this past year, like Tommy and, and some other leagues and stuff, Tommy and I were in 100% agreement on this. We both had Bijan and Breece Hall like ourselves. Like we would not take McCaffrey over those two. Now it ended up working out if you had Bijan and less so if you had Breece. But like we just to us that risk of a potential injury and he's getting older was not worth the potential reward. Like I'd rather be safer and have a guy that I know is, you know what I mean? So like the risk and the reward is not going to be worth what the ADP is going to be this
No.
coming year.
And
We just tell you right now.
I know some couple people asked me for my advice going into this year, and had the same response for everybody. I'm staying away from McCaffrey, and I'm glad I did because
Right.
look how that turned out. It's
Right.
inevitable that Father Time is going to catch up with you. And it's crazy to think that being under 30 and yet you're on a downfall. You know what I mean? And that's when you're in your prime. But no, it's going to be some interesting conversations going into the off season, and as far as where these guys are going to fall. And like you said, where are you willing to take that chance?
Yeah. Well, we could talk about San Francisco all day. Let's talk about some of the other names real quick, and we'll close it out. So in the dishonorable mention category, we've got Ramondre Stevenson finishing as the running back 25. You drafted him as the running back 21, so he didn't kill you. But if you watch the games, I mean, it was just bad. But I think it might have been a product of the New England offense not being so good. He had a period during the middle of the season which he was okay, but really like for what you drafted, like you'd like a little bit more upside, but you knew it was going to be a bad year. Maybe you overdrafted him slightly. He didn't kill you. Um, Travis Etienne, Jesus. So Travis Etienne finishes as the running back 39. He was drafted as the running back 7. Oh, it was bad. One of the biggest busts of the whole year. And it wasn't like, I mean, he was injured for part of the year, but not that much. It was
No.
just bad. Even it's not like Tank Bigsby took that much work away from him either. Like it was just, I don't know how else to say it. It was awful. I mean, I don't like this. Here's an example of a backfield I'm gonna 100% stay away from next year. Not even a question. Ugh.
Unless they
And
take Janty, then I'm all in. So
yeah, I know that's yeah, that's the color all. And love to get your just 2 cents on this. So Isaiah Pacheco, finishes at the running back 61. He was drafted as the running back 11, so did not return that draft value. Obviously was injured for most of the year. His average was much better than what his finish would indicate, but he did not. Still, it wouldn't have been even close to what his draft capital was. Um, Kareem Hunt is not going to be there forever. So, I mean, feel better about Pacheco next year. I mean, he's not going to be
yeah, I
drafted
think
as running back 11 next year, but
I mean it's clear to see that Pacheco's still not himself coming off this injury, and having Hunt there helps alleviate that for sure. I think Pacheco will be back in that top mix next year. I can feel confident saying that. He was out for most of the year, like you said. Um, I think he's still trying to find his footing, get back into the flow. Um, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is gone too from there.
yep.
They have what's his name, the guy with the long hair. I forgot.
Oh, the crocodile guy. Whatever.
Yeah, that everyone was loving. So I
Yeah.
can see them parting ways with Kareem Hunt after this year. Pacheco taking that role 100% back and running with it.
Yep. He's another one of these kind of like running back twos with safety, maybe
Yeah.
more upside for him because they're on the Chiefs, but we'll see how that goes. And then last but not least, so I actually probably should have brought him up when we mentioned Amir Abdullah, but so Zamir White, and the only reason we're even bringing him up is because if you can believe it, he was drafted as the running back 24. So he finished as the running back 82, didn't play for most of the year, and when he did, it couldn't have been more awful. I'll just speed up this conversation by referring back to what Anthony was saying about the Las Vegas backfield. I'm avoiding this whole backfield. It would be nice if Sincere would take over for next year. We don't know, but unless they draft somebody, this is a bad team. This is an awful backfield, and Zamir White's an awful player.
No, I agree. It's another situation where I'm staying far away from this backfield if I can.
Yeah. That's about it. Any other players or any closing thoughts?
Not that I can think. I think we pretty much went through it all. Yeah.
Yeah. So that would be so that's running backs from this past year. Next week we'll be diving into some of the wide receivers, and we are very very happy to and thank everybody for watching and listening. And we love all you guys, and we hope you stay with us going forward.
Yes, thank you so much for all your support, watching these videos, and if you guys can like and subscribe, it'd be a big help to us, and we really appreciate it. And stay tuned for all your fantasy needs.
Thank you guys.